Hello, everybody. How are we doing? And welcome back to the Movie Battleground. My name is Aaron Knoll, and we are here. We are getting close. We are wrapping up the season, and we have the first of our two semifinal matches today. And this really is, in some sense of the word, I guess, a David and Goliath story, because we have the guy who, for all intents and purposes, according to the public, shouldn't be here, versus the usual suspect. We have Joe Farrelly, the number 2 seed, taking on Will Cohen, the number 11 seed. And for Joe, anyone who's ever seen Joe do anything in the fan leagues, this is just business as usual for him. He is a fucking beast no matter what he does. And I mean, again, all time, prior to his first loss, between the old regime and the new one, he won 9 games in a row before taking a loss. His only 2 losses in the history of this league are to literally the 2 best players in the league right now, which there's no shame in those types of losses. And he's on another win streak here coming into this match, hoping to make it to the finals of this tournament. Going up against Will Cohen, a man who, I mean, some people didn't even have him getting out of the first round. And following his matchup against Jeremy in the summer, a matchup where he kind of even came into it like, if I lose this match, I lose this match. That's probably what's supposed to happen. And he put up a good fight. And he's built on that ever since. He knocked out Sean Hunter in that first round. He took out the heavy dark horse favorite in John Marr in the last round. And now he is here to try and pull one more off. So we're going to go ahead and speak to him first. Introducing, with a record of 5 wins, 2 defeats, and 1 knockout, the Virtuoso, Will Cohen. Will, welcome back to the Battleground, sir. How are you feeling today going into this semifinal matchup?
Well, it's kind of like what you said. Like half the brackets I know for a fact did not have me even making it out of the first round, and yet here I am. I just brought a huge shitload of chaos with me, and I'm looking to see if I can bring that energy here tonight. But I'm also in a very interesting position here, the more I think about it, because one or two scenarios can happen. One, I lose, which, as you put it yourself, is business as usual. It's me losing to Joe, who is the biggest heavy hitter we have here. But if I win, I instantly become almost legendary, because that'll make me the 3rd person in history to ever beat Joe Farrelly. So either way, my reputation is pretty solid, after this match. But I am not going to go light. I plan on trying to bring as much chaos as humanly possible while still having as much fun as humanly possible.
Absolutely. Well said, sir. I'm going to go ahead and put you in the back and bring in your opponent. Coming in with a record of 7 wins, 2 defeats, and 2 knockouts, he is Joe Hot Fuzz Farrelly, the former 2-time champion of Movie Battleground. Joe, welcome back. And there are very few people I can know that can hear praise like that being heaped on them, and they're just casually kind of sitting there like, yep, all right, let's do this. How are you feeling tonight, sir?
Yeah, I feel good. It's actually important for me to try and not let that stuff get in. I think last match I took a bit of a gamble by not doing any prep, and I think the debate was a lot closer than I would have liked it to be. So I think I've got a little bit better with the prep this time. But it's 3 a.m. I'm ill, so good luck, Will. But at least I have notes to look at this time, unlike in trivia, where if I was ill, I'd just be like, yeah, we're doing this another time.
Fair enough. Yeah. If anything we can say for Joe, he's been an absolute trooper. This tournament has had the unfortunate circumstance of him having 3 players in a row who all needed to go later our time, which is really, really late his time. But we figured it out. We've made it work, and now we shall proceed. With that said, I will bring Will in, and we'll go ahead and get this match started. Movie Battleground is a game that is a best of 5 rounds. It's the first to 3 points wins. Each round of debate is worth 1 point. If a competitor takes the first 3 points in a row, that will be a victory by knockout. And if at the end of 4 rounds is a 2-2 tie, we will strain both of these men's mental states by going to the blind round. Let's see if we should have to do that. With that said, though, with the 4 questions on hand, they've had their time to prep them. They know what they are. They know what's coming. They will get 60 seconds each to open the first round. Then they will get 2 minutes to expand and explain their picks. There will be a 4-minute open discussion period where they'll trade blows back and forth and try and get in as many points as possible to put themselves over, followed by 60 seconds to close out the debate, at which point I have 3 judges backstage in the form of Jake, Chris, and Sean. They will join me on screen, and they will deliberate and give their point to who they feel has won based off the points made in the argument. With all that said, though, guys, do we feel ready to go?
Good. Good luck.
All right.
You too,
So let's
Joe.
go ahead and get into our first topic. A world that, I mean, for all intents and purposes, based on how it started, looked dead on arrival. Then it got a bit better, and now we're back in the slums. Actually, the night that we are recording this, a big article from THR has come out. Basically, they're claiming that Peter Safran and James Gunn, who have just taken over DC, are just throwing everything to the curb. I mean, the closest thing that looks like it's being kept is apparently they want Momoa to play Lobo. Like, that's the only thing they seem to want to keep, and even that's different, which that's not a bad piece of casting, mind you, but that's how little they want to have this to do with the previous regime and everything that was done before. If what THR is saying is true, it's bye-bye Gal Gadot, bye-bye Henry Cavill, bye-bye Dwayne Johnson. I don't know. Personally, I could keep Zach Levi. That's fun. It's a little disconnected. We can keep him around. But other than that, it seems like everything's out. And so if this truly is the end of the DCEU as we know it, an experiment that was just as disastrous but got further than the Dark Universe, rest in peace. Here's a question for you. What is the most disappointing film released within the DCEU? Because there are a few. Trust me. This is, we are in the era of comic book films. Every single one that comes out is going to get some hype behind it. But what one disappointed you the most? Now, with that said, behind the scenes, Joe, as you were the higher seed of the tournament, you had the choice whether to go first or second on these questions. You chose to go first on 2 and 4, which means, Will, you're up first for this question. I'm going to wish you guys both the best of luck. You guys have both made it here, which means you've earned this, but only one can win. Will, time starts when you begin speaking on your opening minute.
By the time that Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy ended, the idea of an expanded universe with DC actually had a lot of promise. And so when it started, it took some while to find its footing for sure. But where it absolutely disappointed on all fronts was David Ayer's Suicide Squad. David Ayer is was a great indie action director, finally getting his big chance to direct a big Hollywood film. So with the kind of movies he had been directing, he should have been a slam dunk for Suicide Squad. It wasn't. You brought in great cast members such as Jared Leto, such as Margot Robbie, such as Will Smith, some great Oscar winners, some great Oscar nominees, and they all failed miserably. This disappointed on every single front, and that is why Suicide Squad is easily the most disappointing DCEU film.
All right. We'll go ahead and move over to Joe, your opening minute when you're ready, sir.
I think it's definitely fair to say that the DCEU has been a mixed bag. Man of Steel has taken a long time to be considered a good movie. And they didn't really have a film that hit a true consensus of good until Wonder Woman hit. And we're looking at what can be considered as the most disappointing movie in the DCU, not necessarily the worst, but the most disappointing. I don't think you can just look at the worst. I think you have to look at the build-up, the hype, what preceded it. And that's why, for me, Wonder Woman 1984 is the most disappointing movie in the DCU. Man of Steel was misunderstood. I think now people have separated it from the original Christopher Reeves movies and saw what Snyder was trying to do with it. I think Batman v Superman was disappointing, but had its fans, had its supporters. Suicide Squad was flat out bad. And then we got Wonder Woman, and it was fantastic. And that built the hype. That built the excitement. And what we got in the end was the worst.
And time. All right, so it is Suicide Squad versus Wonder Woman 1984. We'll go ahead and get into the 2-minute section. Will, you are up when ready.
As Joe said, as some of the more disappointing titles were considered bad upon release, they have since found their audience or had their audience from the beginning, and people are starting to soften the hate a bit, like Man of Steel, like Batman v Superman. Even Justice League has now found its audience. What other movie has actually found its audience and actually never lost its audience? Wonder Woman 1984. It actually currently has a 73% fresh audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes right now. So even with as imperfect of a film as it is, it still has its audience, it still has its fans, and it still actually managed to keep some of the spirit alive from the original Wonder Woman. Whereas Suicide Squad was promised to be the end of the dark DCEU, the end of the we're not going to make we're just not going to make jokes. No, this was going to be the film that was supposed to rival Deadpool. This was supposed to be the film that rivaled the MCU. This was supposed to be the first bad guy team up that you wanted to see. And there was a ton of hype behind it. They were it was the first time that they were going to bring back the Joker since Heath Ledger in 1998. This was, or 2008 rather. This was the first time, that we were going to see Harley Quinn on screen. This was going to be the first time that we saw Amanda Waller on screen. We were going to see all these great characters brought forth into the fray. And they had, again, great characters like great actors such as Will Smith, Margot Robbie, Jai Courtney, Viola Davis, and the like, and it just completely fell flat. It just completely bombed out on expectations completely, to the point that they had to give away tickets via a T-Mobile preview for this.
Time. All right, Joe, back over to you. Time starts when you begin speaking.
Wonderful. So I think in 2017, when Wonder Woman first released, I think we finally got a true consensus, critically and audience-wide, about a DCEU movie, about how good it could be. And I think it's still one of the best movies in this franchise, and I think what followed has continued to be a mixed bag. It's had its lovers and its haters for movies like Aquaman and Shazam. And I think when we learned what we were going to get with a sequel, set in the 80s, Patty Jenkins remaining at the helm, Pedro freaking Pascal joining the cast, Hans Zimmer coming in to do the score, I think that built up the hype even more. People were already happy with what Patty Jenkins did with Wonder Woman, and to get all this stuff added on, I think that built the hype even more. And what we got as a result was a plot hole-ridden, cheese-filled bore fest that scored 5.4 on IMDb, 0.5 of a point lower than Suicide Squad, and 58% on Rotten Tomatoes. This, compared to a 7.4 and 93% for the first Wonder Woman, shows how big of a disappointment Wonder Woman 84 could be. When you compare the two, when you look at the difference that we were given with those two movies, and then you compare Wonder Woman 84 to the rest of the DCU, it's bad. It is a bad movie. I think these other movies, including Suicide Squad, have some redeeming moments. I think Wonder Woman 84 doesn't have that. Even the moment that should be redeeming, the beginning of the Invisible Jet, is just so plot hole ridden and so badly executed. It's just frankly disappointing. I agree with Will. David Ayer is a great director, and he was a great indie action director. This was his first foray into a true blockbuster with these big stars. And I think the problem is you can't be too disappointed, because we've seen that sort of effort fail time and time again. And I think Wonder Woman 84's reception itself has gotten worse, provided for release. Yes, it has its fans, so does Suicide Squad. But I think even the people that enjoyed Wonder Woman 84 on first viewing, have, including myself, have come back into this and gone, oh, actually, it's bad.
And time. All right, so we're going to go into the 4-minute open discussion. The timer will start when the first competitor speaks. When you guys are ready, go ahead.
So while there are some messy parts of Wonder Woman 1984, all the heart from Wonder Woman is actually still there. All her moments with with her realizing why she did what she did with the wishing rock is a lot of heart, is a great heartfelt moment. Her moments with Steve are great. Even Pedro Pascal's interactions with his son at the end of the film are so heart-wrenching and so wonderful that yeah, it is a letdown if you want to compare the two films, but it still manages to keep that heart, whereas Suicide Squad was meant to be a big, fun film. There's nothing fun about Suicide Squad. It is a
But I
mess
think it
from
does
start
have
to
that heart. I
finish.
think the heart you speak about is still there. I think Margot Robbie gives a fantastic performance. She really understands this character. She gives that small moment when she thinks the Joker has died, and the rest of the squad come in, and you see her compose herself. That's a really great moment. I think Suicide Squad gives what, in my opinion, is a rare, enjoyable performance from Jai Courtney. Will Smith is likable. He has the heart, the moments with his daughter, everything like that. But I think the problem with Wonder Woman 84 is that you don't get that. You get all this expectation, all this build-up based on what's before. Suicide Squad is the Guardians of the Galaxy of the DCEU, in that the mainstream audience weren't really sure who these characters were, and I think that leaves it up to interpretation. It allows it to not be as good because you don't know what you're expecting. With Wonder Woman
But
84, you know what you're expecting.
But right there, you nailed it on the head. This was supposed to be the Guardians of the Galaxy of the DCEU, but the Guardians of the Galaxy was fun, it was colorful, was joke-filled, was very well written, and it was
But I'm
still
referring to
a
it as a concept. I'm referring to it as a concept. These characters that weren't well known by a mainstream audience, so it gives the director a little bit more leeway with what to do with the film. But I think but the difference is, it just wasn't good. You don't have that. You don't have that expectation with it because they're not expected characters. That's why it's not as disappointing as Wonder Woman 84, because you have that expectation built up from Wonder Woman.
But but that's the problem, is that because you actually did know some of the characters. We do know who Harley Quinn is. We do know who Deadshot is because of the TV shows, and therefore we know who Amanda Waller is. We know who some of these characters
a
are.
mainstream
And
audience.
even for the even for a
Harley
mainstream
and Joker,
audience,
yes.
even for a mainstream audience, we know who they knew who Margot Robbie was. They knew who Will Smith was. They knew who Viola Davis was, and they're still being let down. Even the people who were
But
still
you're talking
fans of
about
Jared Leto at
Margot
the
Robbie
time
and
were
Viola
still let
Davis. You're
down
talking
by
about
that
the only
film.
ones with Margot Robbie and Viola Davis, you're talking about the only ones who reprised their roles in meaningful ways. Yes, Jai Courtney did, but he was killed off in the first minute. But the others actually got to
And he
reprise
still
their
had a
roles
better
with
performance
a good
in The
part.
Suicide Squad than he did in Suicide Squad.
But he still had good moments, like Viola Davis and Margot Robbie. That's why they were kept on. Will Smith gave a good performance, but his character, he didn't want to come back. But the difference is, I'm talking about expectation. High expectation can lead to disappointment. And with Wonder Woman, we get such a good movie that's what brings it down in the end. You even look at where the DCEU was going after
Except
Wonder Woman.
expectations were already dulled with all the stories coming out about like what the master production was already, where it already had a bunch of delays, where it already was delayed again because of the pandemic. So by the time it came out, expectations were a little bit dulled, and even
I think they were higher. People hadn't been to see a movie for so long.
And what at the same time, what's your point? There's tons of instances.
Expectations were high and it disappointed more than Suicide Squad. That's my point.
And you're not really telling me how that is exactly when when there's still there's still an absolute fan base for that. All this audience scores everywhere show that Wonder Woman 1984 is more beloved still to this very day than Suicide Squad. So the disappointment may be with you, but it's not with everyone else.
Following Wonder Woman, we've got Shazam and Aquaman, which showed the DCU was on a good trajectory, and then it fell back down. That's where the expectation comes from.
And time. All right, good back and forth there, guys. We're going to go ahead and go into the 1 minute closings. Will, you do have the floor first. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
You can talk about the highs of Aquaman. You can talk about the highs of Shazam and things like that. those are more divisive than you would actually think they are. Wonder Woman 1984 is not as hated as you would think it is. It's definitely while it's a step down, is not a complete disappointment. Suicide Squad is a complete disappointment, even by Warner Brothers standards, who literally gave away tickets so they could pad the numbers so it could actually show that this film was a quote unquote hit. It literally gave away thousands, if not millions of tickets through a T-Mobile promotion to make sure there were butts and seats opening night for this. Wonder Woman 1884 didn't do that. Suicide Squad, people are asking for the Ayer cut for this film. No one is asking for the Patty Jenkins cut of Wonder Woman 1984. Why? Because people are satisfied with the product they got, rather than Suicide Squad being an almost an unfinished, mitigated mess.
And time. All right, and then we're going to go back over to Joe. Sir, you have the final minute when ready.
I think when asking what is the most disappointing, you have to look at more than just the quality of the movie. You have to look at the hype surrounding it. And based on the quality of Wonder Woman, the additions to the cast and crew, and the movies that preceded it, Aquaman, Shazam, this is building momentum. And then you also look at the fact that Wonder Woman 84 was one of the first movies to be released in theaters during the COVID era. There can be nothing in the DCU that is more disappointing than Wonder Woman 84. Suicide Squad, while it was not an enjoyable experience, had its moments, had great moments. It didn't have the hype nor the build-up behind it to make a truly disappointing experience. And like you said, they didn't have to give out tickets for this. Why? Because the expectation was so high because of what we got before. But the movie fell flat. It's rated lower on IMDb than Suicide Squad. It fell completely flat compared on everything. And the reason people aren't asking for the Patty Jenkins cut is because, even more disappointingly, this was the Patty Jenkins cut. And I think that is what makes it the most disappointing movie. You don't have the hype surrounding it. You don't have the build-up. Whereas Suicide Squad had only followed Man of Steel, which wasn't well received, and Batman v Superman, which again wasn't well received.
All right, and that is time, guys. An excellent first round, some good back and forth there, technical issues aside, but we'll go ahead and sit you guys in the back to await this while we bring the judges into the call. So I'll go ahead and run down the fact checks that I was able to pull out quick enough. So when it comes to Rotten Tomatoes scores, since those were brought up, on both critical and audience consensus, there are two things that remain consistent. Suicide Squad is considered the worst film, and the audience enjoys these films more than the critics. Wonder Woman has a 58% approval rating from critics and a 73% from audience. Suicide Squad has a 26% approval rating from critics and a 58% approval rating from audiences. Suicide Squad was not the first appearance of Amanda Waller in live action appearance. If you want to count television as well, she was portrayed by Pam Grier in Smallville. And if you want to count films, she was actually portrayed by Angela Bassett in Green Lantern. I don't beseech you for not remembering that, but she is in the film. In terms of Rotten Tomatoes, yes, Wonder Woman, the original from 2017, is the first film in the DCEU in which the critical and audience consensus was not only positive, but also highly positive. That wouldn't happen very often. Again, the next closest would probably be Shazam, where they are within 8 points of each other. Arguably, and this is definitely a technicality, Suicide Squad was not David Ayer's first blockbuster. That would probably most likely go to Fury, which came out in 2014, starring Brad Pitt, Shia LaBeouf, and Logan Lerman, among others. The movie did have about an $80 million budget and did feature multiple action sequences, so you could argue that that was a blockbuster, certainly smaller scale compared to Suicide Squad, but a step in the right direction. Will Smith returning for James Gunn's The Suicide Squad had nothing to do with his lack of interest in the role. Instead, he was because the production schedule for The Suicide Squad was laid out at the last minute, Smith was actually unavailable. He had just finished in the months prior shooting Bad Boys for Life, and he was currently, I believe, working on his documentary Amend the Fight for America, which was a miniseries documentary he put out in 2021 around the same time they were shooting The Suicide Squad. In fact, Idris Elba, who was initially cast as a Deadshot replacement, had the character changed, or they changed the character to Bloodsport so as not to infringe on Will Smith's portrayal of Deadshot, giving him the option to come back again should they want that. In a post-slap world, we'll see if that happens. And that was it. That was the last thing. So with that said, we'll go ahead and get into this. Jake, I'll go up to you first. Based on what was said in the round, who gets your vote and what was the milling?
I had Joe on this one. He got there with the disappointing after Wonder Woman and the disappointing after Aquaman and Shazam. So, Joe.
Okay. All right. And then Diaz, I go down to you. Who gets your vote, and what was the main selling point?
For a little bit of the beginning of it, almost too real, and then Joe pulled out the end with the hype behind, Wonder Woman in 1984 getting out to Aquaman, and so I said then how the disappointing factor came in. That argument alone switched it to Joe at the last second.
All right. So Joe pulls out the first point there. Judges, thank you guys so much. I'll go ahead and put you in the back as we will go ahead and move on to question number 2. And we are, of course, both recording this and airing this in the Christmas season. It is December. We are celebrating things. And what is more iconic with Christmas than, okay, well, not Santa, not Christmas, not the fact that Hanukkah coincides around the same time. Hallmark movies, shitty Hallmark romantic comedies. That is probably the 4th biggest thing we can associate with the winter season. So let's take that, let's diverge it a little bit. Let's talk about some good ones, and let's talk about some classics, which these Hallmark films are not. The question is, what is the best romantic comedy, holiday or there otherwise? That was just a setup for the question. Of the 1960s. They had a whole decade of classic rom-coms to pick from. Let's see what they went with. Joe, you are going to be up first on this round, so I will go ahead and throw it over to you. Time starts when you begin speaking, sir.
Before the grittier, darker tones of the 1970s, I think came the more light-hearted tones of the 1960s. The 1960s was a big decade for romantic comedies. One in particular remains not just a standout romantic comedy, not just a standout 60s movie. I think it remains one of the greatest movies of all time, and that is the Billy Wilder directed masterpiece starring the incomparable Jack Lemmon, the mesmerizing Shirley MacLaine, 1960s The Apartment. For me, this is a fantastic movie from start to finish, deserving of every accolade it's had for the last 62 years, deserving of every place on every best romantic comedy, best movie, best comedy, best romance movie, best Christmas movie list that it features on. Now, I have nothing negative to say about this movie, and I think for a movie that came out 62 years ago to be able to hold up and be as relevant today as it was then, I think is a truly magnificent feat. I think it's been relevant every year.
All right. We'll give a little bit of leeway there, guys. I hope it's not showing up on the recording, but as we were recording this, there's a bit of lag on my end, so they're hearing me just probably a second after I speak. So with that said, Will, I'll go over to you. You have a minute when you begin speaking.
A movie that can balance both dark and light absolutely perfectly is Charade. The reason why Charade is the best of the 1960s is because it does just that. This film is a spy thriller and a romantic comedy simultaneously, but it never loses either the just electrifying romantic chemistry between Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn, but it is a thrill ride from start to finish. Even when even in the darker moments, it never loses its comedic pacing. It never loses its comedic timing. The work, from the dialogue's wordplay to just the electric chemistry between Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn. It's just a wonderful film to behold. Even if you don't like romantic comedies and action films are more your scene, this is still going to scratch that itch, and you will be enamored by the romance of it.
Time. All right, so we're going to go into the 2-minute portion. Joe, over to you, sir, when you are ready.
I think when you talk about the best romantic comedy, I think the film needs to stand out on both the romance side and the comedy side. The Apartment not only excels in both of these departments, but it also delivers on drama, dialogue, performances. And I think this was a feat that was recognised at the Academy Awards, with Apartment winning Best Picture, Best Director, Best Writing, Best Art Direction, Best Editing, as well as getting nominations for sound, cinematography, and 3 acting nominations, including noms for Lemon and McClane. And I know a lot of people say that, you know, you've got to look at the Oscars in hindsight. You know, was this movie really better than this movie? Did this really do better than this? But for 62 years, The Apartment is a movie that has constantly been considered one of the best romantic comedies of all time, one of the best comedies of all time, one of the best movies of all time, and it has maintained that for 62 straight years. McClane delivers one of the most remarkable performances of the decade. Sweet, smart in the first act, bleak and emotionally ravished in the second, sharp and hopeful at the end. And I think unlike Charade, I think The Apartment's humour doesn't feel dated. It feels just as relevant today as it did 62 years ago. The idea of this woman in a company who's low down in the company, and these powerful men that are taking advantage. And it's the same with Jack Lemmon. He's low down in the company. He's being taken advantage of. And together, and between two of them, they find this believable romance. But even at that same time, it still feels fresh, and it still feels funny, and it still has those moments that really, really hit. And I think for that, just for 62 years of history of being considered one of the best, I think you can do that. I think Charade has fallen down by the wayside in those years. In those years since it came out, I think it's fallen by the wayside. I don't think the performances are recognised. They weren't recognised at the time by the Academy, and they aren't recognised now. I think the same for everything about that movie, including the direction, the cinematography, the writing, everything about that. It wasn't recognised then, and it's still not being recognised now because it doesn't hold up. It doesn't have that staying power that The Apartment does. I think Charade fails across the board on those occasions. Yes, it's a believable romance. Yes, it has some funny moments, but it doesn't hit the levels, nowhere near the levels that The Apartment does.
And time. All right, Will, back over to you. 2 minutes.
While The Apartment is a good film, it is absolutely the wrong choice for best romantic comedy of the 1960s. The romance is paltry at best. If you want to say that, if you want to say that Charade is dated, well, if The Apartment were to be filmed now, it would be a 15-minute film because HR would get involved, and Fred McMurray's character would have been fired for sleeping with one of his employees, in the first place. In fact, all of the execs would have been Me Too'd in an instant. That would have been a short film. So if you want to talk about dated, there you go. That's dated for you. The idea of C.C. Baxter giving up his apartment for, so everyone, all the execs in his company can use his apartment to fuck their, to fuck their mistresses, while they're supposedly on business meetings. That's disgusting to begin with. The romance between Shirley MacLaine and Jack Lemmon's characters is extremely one-sided up until the end, when she realizes that the person that she really loved is never going to leave his wife, and she's sailing for the next best thing. That's not romantic. What is romantic is Audrey Hepburn, who is a beacon in the romantic comedy field. Cary Grant, who's also a beacon. This film just shows them at their peaks here. This is just great. Audrey Hepburn and Cary Grant being just themselves in a great romantic comedy. But then you also have this great action. You want to say that the cinematography is bad? No, cinematography is great. The cinematography sucks you in, brings this great atmosphere. The action sequences are very well choreographed. The music is great. Just because it doesn't get the Oscar gold doesn't mean it doesn't stay in your heart forever.
And time. All right, we're going to go into the 4-minute open discussion. The timer will start when the first competitor speaks.
I think I have to judge Hepburn, like a great actress like Hepburn, and you're getting a performance that for me is just dumb and shallow, and she doesn't know what she wants to be. Charade is a film that tries to be Hitchcockian but lacks that camera work. The movie doesn't know what to do. Is it a romantic comedy? Is it a thriller? Does it, the action sequences, they don't work. All you get is a MacGuffin hunt that doesn't work. It doesn't add to the romantic comedy. You want to talk about the romance in this film? Cary Grant is a character that lies and lies and lies, and the more he lies, the more she grows to love him. That is not the romance, right? Yes, you know what, you want to turn around and say that all the execs would be fired and chewed out by HR in this day and age, then you clearly don't live in the real world, because unfortunately that is not what happens. They get, we'll just move you to another location. That's the reality of what happens. And poor old Jack Lemmon, who still has the best reaction faces in any comedy, is left to suffer along with Shirley MacLaine. But yet they find love.
If you want to call it that. It looks more like settling to me. Him pouring his heart out and her just saying, "Shut up, deal the cards." That doesn't speak to romance to me. And it feels like a nice bit of levity after her suicide attempt, after he gets
that's her way of saying,
around.
I accept you, but sometimes you have to read between the lines. You can't have it spoon-fed like it kind of is in Charade. I mean, the only reason it feels romantic...
There's nothing spoon-fed in Charade. What the hell are you talking about?
It's because it's set in Paris. It's the only reason it feels romantic at all. Nothing about lying to the woman you're supposed to love is romantic.
And yet Shirley MacLaine, who's supposed to love Jack Lemmon, lies to him constantly and hides everything until her suicide attempt when everything comes out. So no, if you're going to say that lying to the person you love sucks, well, it's there in spades right there.
If you can explain to me the reason Cary Grant continuously lies to her throughout that movie, when you compare it to Shirley MacLaine, who's clearly dealing with some severe mental health issues, with someone that she's slowly falling in love with, and doesn't want to reveal her true self to,
he's trying to not only protect, he's trying to protect the information. He's trying to protect her. He's going out of his way to save her on a regular basis. So if he has to keep his identity secret up until the very, very end, when she finally finds out his real name, that's part of the humor of it. There are tons of spy comedies that that do this, and they all learned it from Charade. Charade is a great film, and for this reason. And you want to talk about the writing? You want to talk about the camera work? It's all there. It's all
really?
there.
So why wasn't it nominated? Why wasn't it nominated?
And you said it yourself that that Oscars aren't always perfect. Why?
But after 62 years, there is still the biggest consensus out there.
After 62 years, Audrey Hepburn and Cary Grant are still known as pinnacles in the romantic comedy field, whereas Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine are not.
Okay, but again, you were speaking about the camera work, the writing there. Where's Charade on these lists of the greatest romantic? Where's The Apartment? It's at the top. Is at the top almost every time.
It's at the top because of all the other aspects. The romantic comedy aspect is not the reason why it was driven to the top. Yes, it's a great drama and it's acted well, but it's not the right answer for what the best romantic comedy is, because the romance is barely there at all, if it is there at all. This is not a great romantic film. He is just hung up on this girl who wants nothing to do with him until the very end of the film. That's not romance.
I'm sorry, throughout that film, MacLaine delivers, like I said, one of the most remarkable performances of the decade. She carries everything well. She balances it well between each act and the person she's trying to be.
That still does not show any part of the romance of the film. You keep on telling me that this is such a great romantic film, but but you have not proven any one bit.
Everything about their romance is believable. You see it grow from the first time they meet. It's about the subtleties of the performance. You're going to ask me to defend it. I'm going to try and defend it, but you have to stop speaking over me, because I want to say the subtleties of Jack Lemmon's performance, the subtleties of Shirley MacLaine's, just the way they look at each other, everything about that, every conversation, the connection grows and grows with every time they have a connection, every time they have a conversation in that movie. It grows. Yeah,
she felt more sorry for him than anything else.
They feel sorry for each other.
All right, so that is the end of the 4 minutes. Joe, you'll get the chance to go first. You can continue to defend or take this however you'd like, but you do have a minute left on the clock when you begin speaking, sir.
The Apartment is a movie that, after 62 years, continues to hold up in terms of romance and comedy. A movie that feels as relevant today as it did in the 1960s. The chemistry that is shown on screen between Lemmon and MacLaine shows that they clearly had chemistry off screen as well as on screen. You can see it growing from their first meeting inside the elevator till their final conversation when she says, "Shut up and deal the cards." You see that connection growing. That's her way of accepting him. With Charade, what you get is a movie that tries to be Hitchcockian, tries to be a thriller and romance and a comedy, but it lacks the camera work, it lacks the performances, it lacks the dialogue, and that's why it wasn't recognized for anything at the same time. And even 60 years later, why it's still not recognized. That's the difference. And I've said, yes, you don't have to believe the Oscars every time, but after 60 years, when they're still right, when you still look at The Apartment, you still see where it ranks on these lists. It remains an enjoyable movie from start to finish, whereas Charade's most memorable contribution is an I can't even think of an answer.
All right, that will be time on the round. Will, back over to you. 1 minute left.
All of Joe's defenses with The Apartment prove that it is a good movie, and I have never once during this entire moment, during this entire round, said that The Apartment is a bad movie. It is a good movie, but it's just the wrong answer for best romantic comedy. Why? She is more romantically involved with Fred McMurray's character, who is a sleazebag. Even if this kind of thing happens in modern times, it's still considered disgusting by modern standards. There's casual flirting, but the full romance doesn't really happen. This is kind of like 500 Days of Summer. It's a movie about love, but it's not a love movie. Whereas Charade is absolutely Hitchcocking, to the point where critics actually said this is the best Hitchcock film that Hitchcock never directed. The camera work is great. The writing is great. Walter Matthau is in it, which he puts in a great performance. Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn are a great romantic pair, and they have their legacy as the great romantic couple has actually succeeded everything.
All right, guys, another excellent round of debate there. I'm going to go ahead and set you in the back and leave this one up to the judges. There's not a lot to fact check here. The one or two things I did look up, everything seemed good enough, so I'm just going to take it straight to the judges. With that said, Chris, you are up first. Time to begin the game. Or you're not on, but what's your thing in a timely manner, I guess, is the better way to phrase it.
All right, you're a little bit lagging in, but I've been listening to the argument the best I could. For a moment, I thought Will almost had it, and it just something clicked with me. And he just talked about Hitchcockian film rather than say romantic comedy. Just heard a little bit more for Joe, despite what Will was trying to say about not romantic comedy. I just heard about the long glances, the long everything moment here and there. So I felt Joe hit the question more than Will, and Will made a mistake of talking about the Hitchcock aspect of the film rather than the romantic comedy of the film.
Okay.
So,
all right. Yeah. And then, Sean, I go down to you. Who gets your vote?
I think Joe would also get my vote just because he hit on both pedigree and on top of that, he hit on just the amount of detail in his argument. He had a countering point for just about everything. And Will also had terrific counters as well. But I just think Joe wound up getting a few more points in just for me, personally.
All right, guys, thank you so much. I'll go ahead and sit you in the back as we will move on to the third question of this matchup here. And one of the recurring things within this show is the usage of Rotten Tomatoes. Now, if there is a soul out there who doesn't know what Rotten Tomatoes is, it is a metric site that aggregates officials, in their eyes, certified critics who submit their review to Rotten Tomatoes, and based on whether the review, essentially, when you bear it down to its bare thing, if it's positive or negative, it puts that into what's called the tomato meter, which is what gives you that big fancy number that's posted in advertisements for movies and all over their social media, and it's the thing that people misunderstand. It is not a score. Rotten Tomatoes is not a person. There isn't a group of critics, 3 elite critics that decide what that movie gets. It is an aggregate of hundreds of critics. I mean, nowadays, I think there's somewhere around 250 plus certified critics who probably all see those movies. Yeah, there's more than you'd think. It gets a little wild when you go into the depths of who's certified. But it's a lot of different opinions aggregated together to come up with that score. But it is a thing in our modern society, and it is a thing that has been often cited on the show as a backing point for a film, or a supporting point, or a degradation of a film. But it's never been asked about, and we did get one of those questions in, because this is not a question I came up with. It is a viewer-submitted question that was sent in by an outside source, putting Rotten Tomatoes at the basis of this question. And it is submitted by Zach Shelton. The question is, of all the movies that have received below a 10% on Rotten Tomatoes, which one would you say is the best? because obviously at the end of the day, this is all opinion based. Rotten Tomatoes in and of itself is based on reviews, most of which are written at the time of the film's release, at least on the critics side. So just because something was given a certain score and aggregate rating based on reviews from when it came out doesn't mean that's the opinion of any given individual, nor maybe of the consensus in general. So if the movie that ended up near the bottom, which one would you guys say is the best? Will, you are up first on this question, so I'm going to throw the timer back to you, and the timer will start when you begin speaking.
When digging through the worst of the worst, for this question, a lot of the films that I came across deserve to be there, but then one came across my radar on that list that was so, that just threw me for a loop that it was actually this low on the Rotten Tomatoes rating. I picked Bulletproof, starring Damon Wayans and Adam Sandler. This came out during Adam Sandler's big heyday, his Billy Madison era, his Happy Gilmore era. And I believe this came out even before The Wedding Singer. This was a different film for Adam Sandler. This was not his typical comedy. While this is a very, very funny movie, this is an action buddy comedy, and it hits on all cylinders. It's like the more I watch this film, the more I have to ask, why is it at such a low rating? The chemistry between Wayans and Sandler is absolutely palpable. You have a great role from James
And
Caan.
time.
Great.
All right, and then Joe, over to you for your opening.
Rotten Tomatoes, a perfect tool for supporting movies with high scores and tearing down movies with low scores. But every now and again, a movie will sit with such a low score, you'll be surprised at how much you enjoyed it. And to me, the answer to this question, what is the best movie with 10% or less on Rotten Tomatoes, can be answered with another question. And that question is simply, what is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more. That's right, I'm talking about 1998, A Night at the Roxbury. An early look at Will Ferrell's comic genius, a simple premise that delivers on the laughs in abundance. Comedy is subjective, but there are so many standout laugh moments from this movie. Yes, it's an SNL movie, which have been hit and miss, but this is one of the hit ones. It generated a very simple premise. It showed Will Ferrell at his early best before he became typecast as that overgrown man-child. Despite its 9% score on Rotten Tomatoes, Night at the Roxbury sits at a comfortable 6.2 on IMDb and has a 69% audience score, which puts it fresh among audiences. All
right. And I should clarify as well, because I didn't put it in the wording here. This was clearly off of the critical consensus. Obviously, they are allowed to use audience score as a backing point if they choose. But for anyone going and fact-checking, the 8% and 9% is definitely critic approval rating. But with that said, Will, you have 2 minutes on the clock, sir. Back over to you.
It's interesting that Joe said that Will Ferrell became typecast as an idiot man-child. Well, he got typecast because of this movie. He's a complete man-child in this movie. Night of the Roxbury reads more like the incel handbook. All these guys are just catcalling the entire time. They are. They are just driving around objectifying women, and at one point there's a scene that by almost textbook definition could almost be considered an assault on a woman, and it's played for laughs. This is just grotesque from start to finish. And yet it actually has a 1% higher rating with critics than Bulletproof. Bulletproof is an amazing comedy from start to finish. You never know know with the action what's going to happen from start to finish. The great story of betrayal, where Damon turns out to be a cop and turns in Sandler's drug dealer character, and then have Sandler character turns stateside and asks for his protection is great. They're just bromance that the entire thing is so sweet. You have a friend who is, that loudmouth and obnoxious, and you love him. Or if you are that loudmouth, you have a friend who tries to laugh, who laughs with you and tries to level you at the same time. And then that's not even the best part. You have James Caan, who is just hamming it up to the greatest of ability as the main villain. And there's a great twist at the end where you find out who that the person who's supposed to be the love interest turns out to be an agent for James Caan's bad guy. Night of the Roxbury is just disgusting from start to finish. Bulletproof is wonderful from start to finish.
And time. All right, Joe, over to you. 2 more minutes on the clock.
Comedy is subjective, and I think despite the 9% score on Rotten Tomatoes, I think Roxbury is a fantastic comedy. Yes, there are some moments that don't quite hold up to today's standards, but they're never played as serious as Will makes out. I think Will Ferrell and Chris Kattan give fantastic performances. They have the relationship described and portrayed in this movie between these two brothers is much better than anything that Bulletproof gives us between two bromance. Farrell wasn't yet known for his overgrown man-child shtick. It hadn't become tiresome, and this is where it got started. Without this movie, you do not get his performances in movies like Old School, Elf, Anchorman, even the first 2 Austin Powers movies for that. I think with Bulletproof, you have very few jokes that land, action sequences that are by the numbers and do nothing new, and the performances are basic. Will said that James Caan is hamming it up to the most. No, he's doing a bad job with bad dialogue is what he's doing. This movie wastes James Caan. And that's the thing. This shows the level of this movie. You have Adam Sandler, who, let's agree, most movies belong below 10% on Rotten Tomatoes anyway. Not all of them, but most. Wayans and Caan. These are talented people, and every single one of them is wasted. There are far better movies that could do this. Yes, Night of the Roxbury has some humor that doesn't quite land anymore, but Bulletproof in itself, it does the worst thing an action comedy can do, and it's be boring. Night of the Roxbury is 81 minutes. It's a laugh from start to finish. Richard Grieco's cameo is fantastic. And it's a story about losers and losers who find that success. And I think there's a lot in that people can relate to. And the final moment of Chris Kattan winning back Will by doing the say anything moment, lifting it up, and it's that song. And that song is hits over and over again. And the way they do it in that moment, the way that final moment hits, stops that from becoming a tiresome thing throughout the movie. They have this success throughout, whereas I think Bulletproof doesn't land on any of those fronts. I think it fails at everything it tries to do. The worst thing an action comedy can be is boring, and this movie is boring, and it wastes the remarkable talent there within. You've seen what Sandler can do. We've seen what Wayans can do. We've seen what Caan can do. Nothing.
And time. All right, so we're going to go into the 4-minute open discussion. The timer will start back up when the first competitor speaks.
You can't say that he wasn't, you can't say that he wasn't typecast when this is what he began as. This film shows him as the overgrown man-child, but then you said that it's before he became the overgrown man-child.
It's before it became tiresome. Before it became tiresome.
It became tiresome here. They took a sketch where they are silent for the entire thing, and they should have remained silent. They should remain Tom and Jerry silent, because at least their physicality was great. But as soon as they start talking, the film, it should have just been over. This is just horrible from start to finish.
Bulletproof fails across all its aspects. The action sequences are boring. They're not exciting. If I want an action sequence, I want my heart to be racing. You want to look at buddy crime movies where you can have exciting moments. Your palms will be sweaty, everything like that. 48 Hours, Bad Boys, Lethal Weapon, all of these buddy movies. They have a good relationship between your two leads. And
they have a great relationship. They have a better relationship than the brothers of Chris Kattan and Will Ferrell do in Night of the Roxbury.
Yes, because the movie has a moment where they fall out and that they bring it back together. It's about them finding and learning and understanding each other. Yes, they might have a better relationship overall, but it's better portrayed in A Night of the Roxbury because it shows that underlying tension which you get between two brothers.
Oh, so the underlying tension of Chris Kattan completely verbally and often physically abusing his brother. No, that's not great. No,
you want
to say these jokes are dated by today's standards? No, they were dated by the 90s standards. There was nothing funny about this film at all.
Some of them, as I said, some of them are dated, but at the very least, Night at the Roxbury does have some entertaining moments. It does have moments that bring you back. It makes you laugh. Like I said, the Say Anything rip, lifts that thing above his head to get his brother away, to get him back. The relationship they have with their father.
So basically, it uses references that by the 90s were actually tired, and you think that that's funny. No, it wasn't funny then, and it wasn't funny now. And you want to bring up the Richard.
It's the fact that the song's being used. Again, you're taking it out of context.
You want to bring up the Richard Grieco thing in the 90s. No one knew who Richard Grieco was. The core audience who was going to watch Night of the Roxbury have no idea who Richard Grieco is, nor cared. And the people who want to watch that movie definitely don't know who he is. So you had dated references, even dated by 90s standards.
I mean, we're talking about
standards. It's even worse.
You're talking about the core audience. All you have to do is look at the core audience score. 44% for you, 69% fresh for Night at the Roxbury. So the core audience clearly saw something in A Night at the Roxbury that it didn't see in Bulletproof, because A Night at the Roxbury doesn't bore them, doesn't give them the same thing they've seen over and over again, and gives a fresh new face into comedy. Will Ferrell at the time.
In 81 minutes, they tell the same joke over and over and over again. You want to tell me that there's not repetitive nature in there? Whereas at least with Bulletproof, there's fresh dialogue. You understand where these characters are coming from. You actually get to know everything about these characters. I know nothing about the Butabi brothers by the end of the film, and I don't want to. Going forward, I don't want to see these guys ever return. I didn't even want to see, sit through this film after the 10-minute mark, where the entire joke is told within the first 10 minutes, and they just keep going and going and going, telling the same joke. How many times did they go over that stupid Emilio Estevez story? They tell it multiple times, and it wasn't even funny the first time, and they keep going with it. At least with Bulletproof, they're telling different jokes throughout the film. You get to see different set pieces. You get to see different things. You get to see different interactions. You get to see different characters.
They might be different at moments within. Those action sequences might be different at times throughout Bulletproof, but they were nothing new to the action comedy scene. The thing is,
and that's not the argument.
It's about. It's two brothers who come from a privileged background who are trying to make it on their own, and they have underlying tensions because they're brothers. It's not that hard to understand. But
and we've seen that story countless amount of times, but we've seen it better in vastly other films. Whereas this is just the incel handbook from start to finish.
And time. All right, so we're going to go into the closing arguments. Will, you are up first. Time starts when you begin speaking.
The argument was never about which is what the better action sequence, what the better action film was. But this was about the better film. If you want to look at the better film, you have to go with Bulletproof on this one, because Joe kept on contradicting himself from start to finish. He kept on saying that the jokes feel fresh every time. No, they're repeated every single time. He said, "Oh, well, before he was known as the man-child. He is the overgrown man-child here, and it was tiresome then. The jokes are not dated because it's now the 2020s. It was dated in the 90s. These jokes were offensive in the 90s, and they're even more offensive now. Yes, comedy is subjective, but if you want to go with comedy subjective, Bulletproof is great because you have Adam Sandler at his peak comedy doing something different, which Will Ferrell and Chris Kattan did not do anything different from the sketch that was 10 minutes before, and they stretched it to 81 minutes and was boring as hell. Bulletproof is great from start to finish.
And time. All right, and then Joe, you get the final word on this round. Time starts when you begin speaking.
A Night at the Roxbury is a movie that found its audience and is beloved by its audience. Will said wasn't responsible for its core. It didn't have a core audience, but it sits at 69% on Rotten Tomatoes. 44% of people enjoyed Bulletproof. That's because it doesn't offer anything new. The only way it can offer something new is if you've never seen an action comedy buddy movie before. Will use divisive terms like saying it's the incel handbook, but throughout the movie, the Batavi brothers never develop a hatred of women or blame them for their failures. In fact, they spend most of the time trying to find the right women for them. The whole movie is about part of the movie is about Will Ferrell Chris Kattan taking Will Ferrell away from a relationship that's going to hurt him, is going to abuse him, because they understand, despite their tensions together, he still wants to help his brother and help him in the right way. And I think that's the most important thing. The only thing really repetitive is the song "What Is Love," but when it's used in the right way, and it works. In that last moment that it is used, it is one of the funniest scenes in the movie, and that's why it works. The jokes are not repetitive, but at least you remember the jokes and they come back to you. Unfortunately, with Bulletproof, you don't remember anything about it because it's boring and you just want it to be over gladly. It's only 84 minutes.
And time. All right, guys, another good round there. I'm going to go ahead and put you both in the back while I bring in the judges. And before I turn it over to them, I'll give them just a moment to deliberate while I go ahead and throw out some fact checks. So in terms of this round, there were a lot of options for them to pick from. But here's a fun fact I found while researching this round to kind of find the legitimacy of it. In the history of Rotten Tomatoes, there are currently 35 films that sit with a 0% approval. That means in the history of film, there are 35 movies in which at least not even one person liked them. However, to me, the more fun one is the 1% and 2% category, where one singular person said, "This is good," and it bumped it up. Other films include Uwe Boll's Alone in the Dark, Eddie Murphy's Daddy Day Camp, the Disaster Movie 2008, Epic Movie from 2007. I'm trying to find movies we'll recognize here. Meet the 2%. They found there. So one person, like a guy, liked all these movies, and that's why they ended up here. Oh, the classic Baby Geniuses, 2%. What else do we have here? Battlefield Earth has a 3%, so it's just above that. And the John McTiernan classic Rollerball. And Jack and Jill. So, some real classic films there on that lower end of Rotten Tomatoes. Going to some real fact checks, though, talking about what was said in the round. So Bulletproof did follow the back-to-back for Adam Sandler of Billy Madison and Happy Gilmore. In fact, it was the film that came out right after Happy Gilmore, and it is the film right before The Wedding Singer, if you want to look at his filmography in the order that it was released. Similarly, for Will Ferrell, Night at the Roxbury was the first real leading role that Will Ferrell had. He had not yet left SNL's cast. That wouldn't come till 2002. And prior to this, he had a supporting role in the first Austin Powers film, but this was the first time that Will Ferrell was really at the forefront of a movie. For anyone who didn't understand the reference made earlier, Richard Grieco was an actor who was most prominent in the 80s. He appeared as a recurring character in 18 episodes in 2 seasons of 21 Jump Street. He was then on the show Booker for what looks like a season, and then he did nothing for the rest of his career, although apparently he has a very successful art business. You can find his website, Grieco Art, online if you're interested in purchasing. And finally, for the second time ever, I had to Google if somebody is an incel. Add that to the list of things I didn't think I'd have to do. I could not find confirmations on the Incel Bible Reddit if the Butabi brothers do count as incels, although I did find a scary number of confessions of other people writing about how their brother is an incel. I hope all of you get help. With that said, Sean, I'm going to go to you first. Who gets your vote, and what was the thing that sold you?
Well, for starters, when Joe's response when he just goes, "Do you ever have a brother?" made me audibly laugh my ass off. Aaron will probably be able to see it if he goes back when he's editing this. I was actually fucking howling. This is overall a really hard match to judge. I think for this round, due to the fact that Will brought up the repetitive nature of the jokes within Night at the Roxbury, and it really did come down to them trying to sell their film off of the relationships that the film actually establishes and which one is actually more interesting. I think I would probably have to go with Will, but that's by the narrowest of margins. So yeah,
Absolutely.
Give my point to Will.
All right, so the first vote goes to Will. Tato and that glorious 80s Richard Grieco mustache. I go down to you. Who gets your vote?
I got Joe on this one here. The barbs that they were able to throw back and forth were equal. They were both able to hype their own movies in an equal manner. Where it came down to it, what Will did not have that Joe had was the audience score. That 69 is very nice. So, Joe.
Okay. So close argument, the fact sells you. I just do want to call out and say you can rewind it there. Sean, I'm glad somebody else knew that joke. I thought about making it, but I figured nobody else would get it. Thank you. There we go. Yeah, I got what you were saying. So, Chris, It does come down to you then. Who gets your vote and what was the main selling point?
I kind of went back and forth with both of them. But the thing I was struggling and wanted to hear more from Will, and I think Joe used it to advantage, was example for the movie. So, like, I heard Will bring up, no, my movie does this, but I never heard like specific example. And he just brought up greater depth of Joe, the repetitive nature to jokes and such. So I try to help Joe argument a little bit in the end. A little bit. All I heard was that Damian Wayne had
well, judges, thank you guys so much. I'm going to go ahead. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put you guys in the back. Normally, I'd make a cut and edit to do this, but it's late as hell for everybody. So, judges, I'm going to say thank you if you guys decide to head out. I appreciate your time, because your winner by a final knockout score of 3-0 is Joe Hot Fuzz Farrelly, taking an incredibly huge victory there in the semifinal of this tournament. Joe, again, sir, this is not any type of detriment on Will as a performer. This is the statement of just how good you are. It is nearly 5 in the fucking morning for you, and you are still playing at the top of your game. That record is imposing. 8-2 with 3 knockouts now. How are you feeling after this matchup?
It feels good. I don't know whether it was a mixture of the hour that we're playing at, the illness that I'm currently going through, or the fact that Will made some really damn good arguments. But he got me riled in a couple of those rounds. There was a lot of stuff. Obviously, there's some stuff behind the scenes that threw me in one of the rounds, but I managed to obviously come back to it. But yeah, Will put out some arguments, and I was really looking forward to that fourth question. I want to see how the man was going to defend Wild Wild West. That was going to be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm not going to waste too much of your time, because, as we said, it is late on your end while you're recording. So unfortunately, because of some production delays on our end, basically way back at the start of the tournament, we had some delays in matches that have just kind of shuffled this whole thing back by more than I wanted to. Rather than forcing you guys to try and record and play a title match under a crunch line, your tournament final is being pushed into next year. It's going to be the first match of next season, airing at the end of January. So with that said, on the other side of this bracket, the matchup that goes up tomorrow is going to be the number 4 seed Austin Howell versus the number 9 seed Jay Burns, someone who you are familiar with in the Battleground. So what are your thoughts on that matchup? And then if we could look past it for one match, just to give your thoughts on it, 2 guys that you are familiar with, Henry Sanchez and Amadou Moses, will be taking each other on at the end of the season for that title. Obviously, whether or not you beat your competitor in the next match, you still have your champ's token in your back pocket. So win or lose, you can go for the title if you would like. At this point, you are just playing for, record's sake. And I guess confidence and everything else that goes with it. So, who do you want to play in your next match? And then similarly, just what are your thoughts on who do you think's taking that next title match?
Look, I'm never going to go. Henry played a hell of a match last time we played, but I'm never going to vote against my guy, Rue, ever. We were on a team together in singles here, in the singles division here. We had a team together with the Demolition Men. That was awesome. So I'm never going to root against him. In terms of the next match, I'm going to go with Austin. And it's nothing against Jay. I love Jay. But the hour we play these matches at, I have to keep things down. And that ain't happening with Jay. The volume needs to come down.
Fair enough. If we have to split hairs, let's go with the guy who will piss you off less, I guess would be the way to put it. But Joe, so far this has been an excellent tournament, man. Obviously, last match against Noah, tooth and nail, you got fight out in the end. And then other than that, 2 knockouts in a row, or not in a row, but 2 knockouts is a huge pull for you. So congratulations, sir. This is your final match of the season, so enjoy that earned rest. We will see you back in January for your next match. Take care, sir. As I go ahead and put you in the back, and I will bring in his opponent. And again, I said it to Joe, and I will say it to Will as well. This loss is not any type of observation on your performance. It's an observation simply on where Joe is playing at right now. As he said, just, and I guess, it can be, very openly said. Anyone who's ever spoken to Joe knows that he holds a job that is obviously of the highest importance to any country, and a very important someone in being the Queen passed away in the build up to that last match. So the fact that he was in a place where he had minimal prep, kind of forgivable. And the fact that in these matches where he has had the prep, he's just knocking people out left and right. Again, it's just a testament to how he's doing at this moment. How do you feel following that? Just focusing on yourself for a moment.
So It's exactly what I said it was going to be. Like, if I lost, it was because Joe Farrelly took me out. I was telling everyone going into this, I was feeling confident, but I did say one simple fact. If I'm going to lose to Joe, I want to make him sweat. He admitted I made him sweat, basically, and so I did my job. So the takeaway I'm gonna sit here and take. First of all, Joe is a fucking badass. I love Joe, and he's just going to continue being a badass. He was sick. It's 5 a.m. and he still knocked my ass out. Two, I'm still perfect on my bracket predictions because I predicted myself to lose this match. So
take whatever W you can get.
So you know what? I lost. I'm still winning. Haha, on me. But no.
Yeah, you and Charlie Sheen.
I mean, I go in for my tiger blood injection tomorrow. But in all honesty, this is every bit of just absolute chaos fun that I knew it was going to be. I know that Joe, I know that I couldn't, make Joe smile, or maybe I did, and I didn't see it because he wasn't on the screen half the times. But I hope he had as much fun as I did tonight. That's all I can say.
Absolutely, man. Well, as with both of you guys, this is the end of your season. All things considered, 5-3 with a knockout is not a bad place to find yourself. So, sir, congratulations on your last couple matches, your run, and we look forward to seeing you back next season for more in store as I go ahead and put you in the back. And guys, that is it on another great matchup here in the Movie Battleground. Joe Farrelly moves on. I think that's the result a lot of people would have expected. Maybe not in the manner that it happened, but that is the level that Joe is firing at. To throw out a statistic for you guys, with his knockout tonight, Joe actually ties his potential competitor, Austin Howell, for the most knockouts by an individual in the league. Both have 3. That is easily the highest amount of knockouts that anybody has. And he is just playing at the top right now. I wouldn't want to be anybody that potentially goes against him. But again, we'll put up a solid showing tonight, the best that you can when the score kind of settles out the way that it does. And I think he should feel good about himself with the recent wins he's had going into next season. But guys, that is going to be it for us here tonight. I want to say once again, thank you to the competitors, Joe Farrelly and Will Cohen. Thank you to the judges, Chris Diaz, Sean Sandberg, and Jake Reese. Be sure to tune in tomorrow as the second half of this is going up tomorrow. We're going to have, as I said, the number 4 seed, the man who wasn't even supposed to be in this tournament, and he's had 2 knockouts already, Austin Howell, taking on Jay Burns, who made it to a semifinal in the last tournament. Can he finally get over that hump and make it to the finals? We shall see. But guys, thank you so much. Please rate the video, drop a comment, subscribe, interact with the channel, and stick around, because while this Movie Battleground season may be finishing out, we have a lot more coming next year with some fun matchups. And on behalf of everybody here, my name is Aaron Knoll, and we will see you next time on the Movie Battleground. Take care, everybody.